Hey everyone, my name is Nick Lambert. I'm the CEO of Doc Labs and welcome to our latest live event. Today's topic is all about how will digital ID impact IAM and IGA. So in this episode, we're lucky enough to be joined by Henrique Teixeira, who is the SVP of Strategy at Saviynt, is also a former Gartner analyst for his sins. And we also have Tim Cappalli, who's the Senior Architect of Identity Standards at Okta. So welcome to the webinar, guys. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Nick.
No, you're more than welcome. So what we'll get into today is, we'll let the guys introduce themselves just in a moment. But what we're going to look at today is where can digital ID credentials add the most value in IAM and IGA. We'll also be looking at how do we get measurable return on investment, ROI, from these technologies? And how can practitioners in the space, or just those who are interested, how can they think about integrating them into these existing architectures? Just a bit of housekeeping as well, just so you know, IAM, I know that a lot of our audience will be from the kind of ID and V space as well. So IAMs, we'll hear that word a lot today. So it's going to be Identity Access Management. And it's really about managing digital identities and controlling access to resources within a large organization or a large enterprise typically. And then IGA we'll hear a lot about as well, and that's about the governance and administration of the identity. So it enables companies to layer in policies and things like that, and to ensure that the governance used around the identity management reflects that of the organization and whatever external policies and politics that they need to adhere to. So just so you know, for those of you who are familiar with these events, it will be a similar format to what we normally do, kind of 45 minutes of Q&A with the guys, and then some audience questions. So if you are in the audience, thank you so much for joining us. If you would be kind enough to pop into the Riverside chat where you're listening from, and also that would be the same place that you would put in the questions. At the end, we will round up the questions and we will ask them to the guys at the end. So thank you very much. Enough waffling from me, and happy to introduce you first of all to Henrique.
Awesome, and thank you, Tim. Hi, Nick. No, it's a pleasure to be here. As you said, I work at Saviynt today, which is an identity security company. IGA is one of the things that we do. I run strategy over there. So that includes a lot of things besides looking to the future of our products and roadmap and strategy and vision, but also our analyst relations and our competitive intelligence as well. And of course, the part of the analyst relations is very interesting because, as you mentioned, before joining Saviynt a year ago, I was a Gartner analyst covering the space of digital identities, but identity and access management as a broader topic, including IGA and other things. And I did that for 5+ years. And before that, always in the identity industry for 25 years. Man, it makes me feel old. But always glad to be joining here. And I know we met last time, Nick, in Germany. Was very lovely during Carpenter Call. So I was very delighted with the invite and to be here with you guys today. So thank you again for inviting me.
Oh, not at all. Yeah, it's great to have someone with your experience on here as well. And you're not the only one that's feeling old, so don't worry about that, Henrique.
Thank you.
Yeah, Tim, the same from you, please.
Yeah, thanks for having us again. Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Tim Cappalli. I'm a standards architect at Okta. I work primarily in the digital credentials space. So right now, working heavily on verifiable digital credentials, and kind of in the past worked on kind of bringing Passkeys to the market. That work is not done, obviously, but we're in the tweak and optimize phase. I typically work on APIs and protocols, but also like the ecosystem pieces, right? Like no technology works unless people use it. And so filling in some of the plumbing gaps is turned into something that I like to do. So like the digital credentials API was like a missing piece of like how to actually request and issue digital credentials at scale for users. So that's something I've been involved in as of late. I'm based in Boston, but currently in San Francisco, and excited to chat today.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, thanks again for joining us. Henrique, to you first then. There's a lot of different ID technologies in play today. How do you expect them to change the way that organizations, I guess both big and small, are approaching identity governance, and access management?
It's always a cycle, right, Nick? It revolves in waves, if you will. New things coming up, the old become new again. When we think of, for example, things that Tim was talking about in Passkeys and passwordless and things like that. Passwordless is a new approach to a very old thing. It's using X509 certificates, which they've been around for decades. And in that area of digital identity, in specific and identity governance, right? So we see also a separation of what they call full IGA, and then market is it's also seeing new entrants in that space of light IGA, which is an interesting response, I would say, from the buyer. Say, okay, I know we have this huge problem in governing and compliance, but it sounds too complicated. Right? How can I start in an easy way? And statistically, 50% of those IGA projects, identity governance projects, they're so complicated that they fail. So 50% of those projects are in distress right now. So a lot of that new entrants in light IGA, established players like Saviynt also providing light and full IGA as a response to that. I think today, it's a combination with new ways of solving problems using AI, right? So using AI to do the repetitive, the difficult things for us. And I think that's also reflecting in IGA and identity as a whole, right? So what can we harness? What can we extract from this type of benefits that AI can bring us? So a lot of that we could be talking about today, but especially that's IGA, right? But if we think about the digital identity, and just before we started, I mentioned Gartner, the hype cycle, right? They do trace. So for the ones in the audience that have subscriptions to Gartner and have access to the hype cycle, so they publish a hype cycle on digital identity. Emerging stuff that I think it's pretty interesting, right? That we could talk about, for example, age verification technologies. Right, in digital identity. You guys may have heard about Australia, for example, prohibiting social media for teenagers, right? Which is quite a big move. Well, I'm a parent of kids today here in Canada, and so, well, we know the damaging effects of social media in young brains. So age verification technologies, right? So using our face biometrics to detect how old are you allowed to see this type of content or not? Very interesting thing. OpenID Foundation. So now talking to Tim, side of the world there on standards, right? So OpenID Foundation coming up with CAPE, right? A protocol for shared signals, but also the risk incident sharing and coordination. So those are emerging things today in digital identity in specific.
Interesting. It was an interesting point you said at the start there, Henrique, as well, where you kind of said overly complex, I think, related to governance structures. And that's an interesting thing, because you would tend to think that everything that's done in this space is all about improvement and making things better. But sometimes throwing technology at something doesn't always achieve that objective. So that was a kind of interesting point that you made, if I picked that up correctly.
Exactly. And I'm not the one who said this first, but coming up with a simple solution from a difficult problem, it is super hard. All right. So making something simple, it is super complex. And managing governance of identities, it is complex because of the connectivity, right? So it doesn't do anything if you're not connecting with agents and connectors to hundreds, thousands of endpoints that an enterprise might have, right? Or if you have controls on lifecycle, or the granularity of the permissions of those users, right? And I see also this overlap. When we think about digital identities, I think first thing that comes to mind is CIAM, or customer type of use cases, B2C and B2B. But that type of ease of use, like a consumer grade type of experience, is also now floating towards the workforce as well. So yes, I think a lot of the leaders that I speak to, they say, no, I understand. Yes, we need all these features in this checklist that I need to fulfill my job to be compliant and safe. But by the way, I want that same list, but in an easy way to consume.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you want your cake and you want to eat it as well, Henrique.
Right, exactly.
Um, yeah. Tim, Henrique mentioned quite a lot of different things there. I know you kind of talked about passkeys and things in your intro as well. What other technologies are you excited about just now that you see impacting the IAM and the IGA space?
Yeah, so I think one interesting thing I often gets left out of, especially the passkey story, is there's these immediate reactions to like, oh, passkeys kind of are an anti-pattern to workforce authentication. And I actually think quite the opposite. Workforce has been the biggest benefactor of passkeys because the technologies that were brought into the native, the devices that everyone uses for consumer scenarios are now actually available for workforce too, and those weren't there before. So the idea that, for example, you can have a digital identity wallet on your phone for work that has a device-bound passkey that you use to sign into all your work stuff wasn't really possible before without doing proprietary things. And so now you have this really strong hardware-bound credential largely in your control that the user always has with them, and they don't have to carry a security key anymore, right? So the same thing's going to start to happen with VDCs and the digital credentials API and wallets, right? Like you have kind of limitless possibilities now to control your own destiny, if that makes sense. Because there's so much plumbing now available that wasn't there before. And there's obviously caveats, right? Not everything's gonna be available everywhere, but there's significantly more opportunities to be able to address your own use case that before you had to convince the entire industry that this was a good idea and bring everyone on board and go through that entire process of, maybe even standardization and then getting people to implement and then getting people. So like a lot of that now we've kind of set a base layer unintentionally that like all this stuff kind of there's plumbing for it, and you have maybe, and before you had this much flexibility, now you have this much flexibility to do what you need. But that also comes with challenges, right? Like passkeys are passkeys, they just kind of work, right? There's no, I did a session at Identiverse, right? Like passkeys versus VDCs, right? Passkeys only do one thing, and some people think that's a bug, but that's a feature, right? They authenticate users. That's it. There's no claims, right? Like that's great. VDCs get interesting, right? Because if anyone can mint them, anyone can put what they want in them. How do you trust them? How do companies trust each other, right? Which is not a technology problem often, right? It's a trust framework problem. But it does have the potential to solve some very interesting IAM problems that have existed. The one I like to use the most, because I experience this a lot, right? I work in standards, which means I mostly work outside of my company. And I have to access documents in various services that are obviously not from Okta, or not protected by Okta's corporate IT. And one of the interesting use cases for VDCs is working across companies without setting up federation, right? Setting up a federated relationship between two companies is actually pretty complicated, right? Unless you are in that bucket of like, you happen to use the same platform and all the knobs are enabled and there's a lot of variance there. VDCs are the ability to say like, hey, I want to share a Google Doc to someone who uses Microsoft 365. All I care is that they work for a certain company. I don't even need to know it's the specific user, but I want to make sure like, because we have an agreement with a legal agreement with this company, that only someone from that company can see it. The way that's handled today, in most cases, is you create a public link, and like anyone who gets that link can see a document. Because the alternative is there's two alternatives: set up federation, not going to happen, right? Most enterprise IT won't even entertain that. Actually, there's three things: set up federation. The second option is ask the user to create a consumer account for that service, right? Google account, Microsoft account, so you can invite it, which also raises red flags. And then the third one is like copy the file somewhere else, right? And those are all very bad things, right? So some of this technology will help to bridge some of these. I don't think they're actually technology problems, right? Federation is not intended to be super easy to set up because it's meant to be controlled, right? It's meant to be these very explicit relationships between companies. So like VDCs, right? If we can get to a point where everyone from every company has a very basic bare bones employee ID card, that's great. Like we can have trust frameworks, we can implicitly trust certain groups of companies. And then you could imagine a share dialogue instead of saying email or public link a new thing that says like anyone from this company, right? And you're looking at that trust framework. So that's the example I like to use because I run into it a lot. There's a lot of other IAM related cases like joining meetings, right? Like I remember when during the pandemic, right, everyone loved Zoom because Zoom was easy. Well, Zoom was easy because there was no authentication, right? Like everyone hated the other platforms because like you had to sign in, which is important. And so like getting, again, typically not a federated relationship, but like strong, with AI, with proof, proof of personhood is really important. Like knowing this user is at some level who they say they are behind even a meeting where a very important topic may be discussed that could have huge implications for a company. It could be a government, right, starting a war, right? Like there's all these like very, very scary things that are at risk. And it's mostly because, again, the tools are not, it's all back to like federation and setting up relationships. And like, that's what, VDCs, if you look at the way NIST is talking about VDCs in revision 4 of 863, they're really starting to kind of position it as like an alternative form of federation. And it is, right? It is like a statement that you can use multiple times to present to others, right? And that is what federation is, but federation is typically a one-time statement. So anyway, been rambling for a bit, but I'm very excited to see what people do with that. It will take obviously some new thinking and it will take time, but I am very excited to see how we can start bridging some of the gaps to maybe prevent people from doing what we know as stupid things, but at the end of the day, people are just trying to do their job and get things done. So
yeah.
Well, so much to unpack. Hey Nick. Because I remember during the pandemic, all the Zoom bombing. Do you guys remember that? So can you imagine how crazy this is? Like you already have all this amount of work to do. You're joining other people's meetings and just like bombing them. But I like what you said about Passkeys. I don't want to let it pass before we move on because, man, I'm a big fan, right? And Passkeys, I agree with you. Is it perfect? Of course not. Nothing is perfect, but it's way better than the alternative, right? And I think Passkeys is one of those type of technologies. They combine two things: the ease of use. It's actually easier to use Passkeys than remembering passwords, and it's safer than using passwords. So combining those, it's kind of rare when you find technologies like that they combine the ease of use with also adding additional layers of control and security, right? Yes, there's multiple device challenges with Passkeys and etc. But I'm a big advocate when you see people using an iPhone, an Android phone, and then using that even outside of our world here, our niche of identity, like real people. When I say consumers using this, is that I think it's a good thing, right?
Yeah, I was on BART going to my hotel last night and just watched someone sign with a passkey, and it was so wonderful. It was like so quick. And
it is amazing. So I want to make it clear because I'm a big fan and an advocate for passkeys. It's one step in the right direction. But also the second thing you spoke about on the work relationships, how you prove yourself, you're working from that company, right? I think that's an interesting area to talk about, Nick, as well, because when we think of digital identities in the consumer world, but that's when the two worlds, they blur themselves with workforce as well, right? So the B2B type of relationships with supply chain providers and other external extended workforce people like temporary contractors, right? And it's got to be a better way, right? To tell, hey, I'm Henrique, I'm working from this company that we work together, but we need to establish federation, which is super expensive and super complicated to do. Is a better way, more lightweight way of doing that. So to your point, Tim, and to my point earlier on the hype cycle, the Gartner, and I think verifiable claims, right, and verifiable credentials, it's already reaching a slope of enlightenment, as Gartner says, right? So of something that is almost there in terms of mainstream adoption.
Yeah, and it's great to see. I mean, from just the consumer perspective, obviously, there's pretty much all the mainstream services, like I use Spotify for listening to music, obviously Google a lot as well, and all these services are now kind of ramming passkeys down your throat. I think it's still tricky to manage from an educational perspective, and I think they often don't try too early on. They just say, here's this passkey thing, it's great, you should want it, and I'll explain it to you later on, because I think you probably lose most people in trying to tell them why they should want this thing. But I think it seems to be doing a really good job of getting it in front of users. I'd also think it helps educate. I mean, I see kind of verifiable credentials or claims as the natural extension of passkeys. For me, it's kind of like that authentication with a lot more context potentially and lots of different use cases. And I think some of the tooling there is starting to get people used to storing something on a device that's not a password that they can then use to access something. So I think it's starting to build that kind of educational journey. So I think they're certainly not, I wouldn't see them as competing technologies, and I don't think anyone's claiming that they are, but I see them as really nice extensions of certainly are complementary to one another.
100%.
It's interesting yeah, absolutely. And when you kind of talking, Henrique, when you're talking there, are you being asked by clients now around use of digital credentials, verifiable credentials as part of, solutions either now or solutions in the future? Is it, when you say it's kind of early in that hype cycle on the Gartner side, is that something that you're also seeing in your kind of strategy work with Saviynt?
I am very much. And to your point, Nick, I don't think those things are mutual exclusive, right? So Passkeys, it's built to do one thing, as Tim was talking about, right? It's the authentication piece, and the verification is something else. And speaking of verification, IDV, identity verification technologies, right? So biometric or document-centric. Just for the audience that's not familiar with this, there's a market of tools that exist for this type of identity verification, which is to prove that me as a physical individual, I own this digital identity, right? I'm the owner of that identity. So it's similar when you walk into an airport and you have Clear or you have a TSA fast approval system. So Henrique is really the one that holds this passport, right? So identity verification is an example, right? Another technology that Gartner is putting on the mainstream adoption already, and there are several methods of identity verification. Like I said, biometric is one, but it could be document-centric, where they take a selfie with a driver's license, for example, and but it could be based on your phone company, for example. Say, hey, I know this is Henrique because he's using a phone which is registered in our network. So there's several ways of doing IDV, identity verification, and that is becoming part of the workflows of IGA, right? Speaking of what I do today in strategy, is that how can we raise the bar in terms of cybersecurity controls for this type of users that come externally, right? So somebody that works with my company as a contractor or as a business partner, because I have no control of the life cycle of that user. They were not hired by my company, so I didn't do any background checks. We didn't have like a contract with that person, but he's now performing work for us. So IDV is one of the things that Saviynt has included in our flows as well. So when we are onboarding somebody and provisioning accounts for that person, we can have that as part of either biometrics or document-centric identity verification as part of that flow. And I can see that for work, if you are like Tim or I, we're almost remote 100% of the time, right? And you open a support ticket with your company and say, hey, my laptop is broken, or I can't log in that application. IDV also can help you identity verification on adding another factor to say, hey, are you really Henrique, or are you just talking with a funny accent to go by Henrique, right? So those are things that we're starting to see in strategy of, okay, how can we, number one, be ready for this type of new world normal way of doing business, which is everything is remote. All the workloads are remote everywhere as well. It's not only cloud anymore, it's another layer on top of cloud, which is AI agents, this kind of stuff. And I have a question for you guys. Do you think those existing controls are sufficient, right? Maybe a rhetorical question here. But when we think about AI agents also behaving as additional workforce employees, right, and doing business in our behalf, we may have to think of other controls on top of that for their digital identity as well.
Yeah, I'll let you answer that one. I think, though, it's kind of moving from that weird world of trying to keep the bots out to trying to let them back in. And I think, yeah, there's going to be a lot of reconfiguration required to make that safe. But Tim, I'll pass that over to you.
Yeah, I try to actually make sure the only thing I care about is proving you're not a bot. Like that's kind of my split. If you know Aaron Parecki, my peer, he's kind of like how to make the bots work. I'm like how to prove you're not a bot. Like how you're a human.
So that's very cool. Separate.
And it's not an official designation. It's just kind of how things went, right? Because part of verifiable digital credentials, right, is proof of personhood, whether it's the official proof of personhood thing that you may have read about, or
humans, right?
implicitly via other mechanisms. But that's going to be a really important part of, as you've seen with Passkeys, right? User experience has become really important. So we haven't really, a lot of protocols and standards have not traditionally been built with user experience up front, right? It's a lot of like fix it afterwards. And this is another area, like how do we want the web to be in an agentic AI world? Is everyone literally going to have to do proof of personhood, which is effectively a CAPTCHA, right? Like it's going to be worse than that, to be honest with you. But like it's effectively every time you do something, you get a CAPTCHA or a Cloudflare thingy, right? Like that's essentially what people will start to enable on their sites, because they don't necessarily want this. Like one way I kind of pitched this problem, because as much as I don't want to care about this problem, I obviously have to. So like there's kind of like three big buckets here, right? You have like services that are like agentic AI ready, and a badge, right? Like we have our APIs, they can be consumed by an MCP server, all these things, right? And like we as a company that enable these, we are like embracing this, right? Go point your stuff at me. Then there's like, I have public APIs, but they're not like optimized for this stuff, right? They weren't really intended. They don't have fine grained authorization, right? So better off than most, but still not there. And then you have like, my APIs are meant for my apps, right? Like airline apps, for example. A lot of people reverse engineer the airline apps, the APIs that the apps use, like the Delta app. Like how do you actually check in? People have figured out, oh, well, you can like man the middle and figure out those. So that's kind of the bucket. Like we are not agentic AI ready, but like someone could figure out that it won't be easily discoverable necessarily, but could start to point services at it. But then you get into like the hostility problem, right? Like, and not taking an opinion on whether this is right or wrong, but like services may explicitly not want you to be pointing things at this, right? Like some of these APIs are meant for your own apps, right? And so you get into this, like you kind of U-turn back to the middle, and it's like, okay, so for the hostile situations, and hostile is not the right word, I'm sorry, it's going to get recorded and
malicious.
Not even malicious, just like against the original intent, right? Because it's not necessarily, it's just like, I mean, as a service owner, right, you have expectations for what your service is used for, you have terms of use, et cetera. And so what gets polyfilled over that problem is the operator use case, right, where you mimic a human. That's the one I'm most concerned about, right? That's the one that involves proof of personhood, right? That's the one that involves, like, in a non-passkey world, you giving your agent all of your passwords, right? Like that is the one I am super worried about. I'm not worried about like the services that are agentic AI ready and like you set up like an initial relationship and you get push notifications and you authorize things. Like that is all like vanilla, like consent and OAuth and all the stuff we already have with some nuance. I'm really worried about the like, you didn't give me what I want, so I'm breaking in now effectively, right? Like that's the scenario.
I do think as well, like I think the services are not going to want to just hand over control. I think like what you won't move to straight away is this like notion that you tell the AI what you want, it comes back with a couple of options, and you work from within the AI console. Like the platforms will not want, they want control of that experience. So I wouldn't expect that will be technically possible, almost now, but I think it's going to take some time for the platforms to get prized away from owning that owning that experience. Trying to kind of bring us back, because the AI stuff is so interesting, and you literally could spend the whole time talking about it. But just kind of coming back a little bit, Tim, what just to get a sense from you guys in the kind of going back to the credential part, is that something that you're finding a lot more? I'm just interested to see in terms of like market adoption levels. What are you guys seeing at Okta? Are you agreeing with Henrique that we're in this kind of enlightenment phase of mega early adopters, or are you starting to see more, I wouldn't call it mass adoption, but more interest at a larger scale?
I would say the interest is exponential. Every additional state in the United States that starts issuing mDLs, for example, the interest goes up significantly, more inbounds. And obviously the ticking time bomb that is the EU Digital Identity Wallet project. Time bomb in a good way, by the way. That wasn't meant to be but that is like a very well known and big thing coming. So it is increasing. No, I don't think we really have too many folks saying like we cannot move forward with our business plans without it. But it's gonna become more and more critical. Even just a basic age proof, right? There are some states in the United States where to do basic web browsing, you need to
Yeah.
do an age proof, right? So, and that at some point that will be like, well, it becomes table stakes IAM, right? It's like, it is, this is like, I see all of this as like the next, like we had Federation, OIDC, SAML, that was kind of a wave. Now we like, it's kind of becoming table stakes IAM of like being able to issue and verify VDCs. The verification of government issued is like absolutely table stakes, right? Like that is, I mean, I don't believe you'll be able to operate in this world in the next 5 years if you don't have that capability. I think the issuance of your own, there's nuance, right? That's a hard problem because of the ecosystem problem. That's one of the things I covered in my Identiverse presentation, right? Like you, in 99.9% of cases, you can ask for a passkey and you get one back, right? When you want to issue your own VDCs into a wallet, in most cases today, there is not a wallet on the device that can actually take that credential, right? And so that is going to be a very interesting, I think we're going to see a lot more, for lack of a better term, closed deployments to start, right? Like meaning you have to install our wallet. I don't think anyone wants that as the end goal, but we do need, it's the chicken and the egg problem, right? We need to rally around use cases, get agreement, right? There was some early work done by Microsoft and Ping that was at Identiverse a few years ago where like there was like an interop profile. So like we can all, and I think Workday was involved in that too, right? Like we all can issue and verify into each other's wallets. And that was very small scale, right? Even though those are very big companies, it was very small scale. We need that for like across the board for use cases, right? Like there's going to be...
Yeah, and it's still early, and we're playing about with another. I wouldn't name them because it just wouldn't be fair. But we're kind of playing about with another company's kind of wallet and looking at our credentials going in using OpenID Connect, and it was the OpenID Connect 4, and even that's like very early. So like they didn't have certain parts of the spec enabled, and it just didn't work. And it's still an aspiration to have this interoperability. It's still not quite there. I think things will improve.
Yeah, and the piece that I think needs more conversation, right, is like there's effectively 3 classes of credential: short-term, mid-term, and long-term, right? Long-term is like things that are physical world today, like a birth certificate or your college degree, right? Like that you need to keep forever. And so that can't realistically be hardware bound. And so you need to be able to back it up when you get a new device that needs to come with you. Similar to like synced versus device bound passkeys, right? 2 different classes. And so then you have like the medium term credentials, which could be like, an employee ID. I kind of put in the medium term because generally most people stay at a job for some time. The employee ID, there might be a desire for that to be hardware bound because you're using it for account recovery, getting back to an account. And then you have like the very like short term stuff, which is like my Lululemon loyalty card. Like who cares? Like it doesn't even need to be like, it's essentially a bearer credential anyway. But those SIAM experiences are very, very exciting, right? Like, and I'm going to go on a quick tangent, but I'll come back. Like the quick tangent is like, there are so many, if you think about your day to day as a consumer, especially in the United States, everything is tied back to your phone number, right? Like if I have an online account for Lululemon, the only way they can look me up in the store is my phone number. And in most cases, they still, and this isn't to pick on Lululemon, it's just a top of mind example. Like in most cases, like there's still 2 different systems, right? You can't see your order history. So like the idea that like we've had like the ability to save a pass to your wallet for like 10, 15 years, like Google Wallet in 2014, you could save like I remember my first one was the Coca-Cola rewards program and you tap on a soda machine. I was like, what? But like we've had this capability, but it hasn't actually been used in practice to bridge the physical and the digital world. And so we rely on phone number. And it's like not the end of the world, but it's not a great experience. And it's like you probably shouldn't tell everyone your phone number for the same reason you shouldn't, the nice thing with digital IDs, you don't have to tell everyone your address when you're going to a bar, right? So those are short-term / low risk, but they might represent long-term relationships. And I guess my meta point is like, they're not always time-based and they're not always security-based and they're sliding. And you're gonna have different wallets that do different things. And like your password manager will probably be a wallet. Like that was the original wallet. If you know me well, like I hate the term wallet. I think it's just like an overloaded term. Like a credential manager is my nice technical like catch-all, because like your passwords, your passkeys, your autofill, your mDL, your EID, they're all in your credential provider, right? They're just credential managers. And so it'll be very interesting to see where we have like workforce dedicated wallets or like, your system wallet, right? The built-in wallet will be very interesting because like, will that become like passkeys where like you can kind of just get an expected result every time? I don't think so, because there's so many options in this ecosystem. But I think we will start to see some settling in the middle of like, okay, there's kind of these universal wallets that users will recognize and understand and like become like the centers of their digital life. And if it's not tied to a specific vendor, I think that's even better. But those are all those variables of like, what kind of credential is it? How long do I need it? Does a user understand like that they need to keep it? And that's one of the comments you said earlier, and then I'll wrap my comments here. I don't like that our industry measures success of technology on whether users understand it. I think that's the wrong metric, right? Like users don't know what Bluetooth is. They know it makes their headphones work, right? Like users don't know how tap to pay works, but they know when they see this icon, they can tap their phone on their card, right? Like that's all that matters, right? Like, and I think there is nuance there, of course, right? Like when you get into like storing artifacts, like users at least need to know where it goes, but like that's all we really need to work as industry to like think about the outcomes and not whether like, we have people who won't deploy passkeys because users don't know what passkeys are. And I'm like, that's okay. Like they just see it as the biometric, right? Like during the user research and this is a tangent, sorry. During the user research for passkeys, we learned like users truly associate it with the platform biometric name, right? Like that's all they think about it. So like when they were like autofilling a password, like they would use Touch ID for some or Windows Hello, and then they would be asked to create a passkey using Touch ID, and they'd be like, "Well, I just did Touch ID," right? Like so, like that's the level that most users operate at, which is good. Like they shouldn't. If they have to understand everything, we failed, right? So finding a way, and this is my meta point here is like it's going to be even more complicated with wallets and especially like long-term, short-term. I use this for work. I use this for this, and that's where I think things like the Digital Credentials API will abstract that away because it's less like we did for passkeys. The users don't have to understand where their passkey is. They need to select a passkey that's available. That's going to be the Digital Credentials API, for example, kind of masks a lot of that complexity and says like, hey, here's the place you actually have that credential that meets the criteria. And that's going to be definitely super important for using the technology. And then we'll have to figure out how users understand where they're storing them long term.
Yeah. No, great points. And we talked a little bit about kind of user benefits and stuff as well. Henrique, from your perspective, from being a kind of provider of these services, where do you see the upside in terms of kind of providing credentials? I mean, there's obviously user benefits as well, and that in turn has benefits for your customers. Are there others besides that you would see as benefits to yourselves from you starting to embrace this new technology?
Oh, yes. We can think of privacy, right? So we speak of privacy preserving type of technologies. So we spoke at the very beginning on age verification type of technologies. So it would be great if you want to go into a bar and see a band you really like, right? Do they really need to know the day you were born? Or say, no, I'm above this legal age, so I can enter a bar, right? So that type of privacy preserving type of things, right? So you walk in to sign a contract for a new cell phone plan. Do they need to know what's your mother's maiden name and this kind of stuff? Maybe not, right? So I think with digital credentials, you can slice and dice pieces of your credential kit. If you want proof, I'll give you this verifiable piece of technology. And to Tim's point, it doesn't have to be something that the user knows how it works, but 100%, they need to know and understand how to use it, right? It has to come like second nature to them. Like how we use an ATM today. Oh, we punch in a pen and money comes out. It's a universal flow for customers. That same thing with tap and go. So when you pay something with tapping, it's the same. Passkeys. We gotta think of ways that the standard is so familiar that it's impossible for them to screw it up. Right?
Associating actions to outcomes, right? That's ultimately what matters. Right?
Exactly, and that's why I believe and I predict wallets. They are way into they have to evolve a lot until they get more mainstream adoption. And I'm not talking about just Apple Wallet and Android, Google Wallets. I'm talking about more of a workforce digital identity wallet for you can travel or you can go to work with that wallet. Because people, they're still working on, okay, but what's the business case for this thing? Who is paying for this? What's the trust network for this? So all the talks on decentralized identity, the true decentralization of identity and portable digital identities and wallets, I think it's not there yet, right? We're still in the we're going to that phase of, okay, I'm kind of disappointed where we are in the technology until it picks up again. Now, to what we spoke about before on the verifiable claims, we're already there. Identity verification is there. Passive biometrics. So there's a lot of other things that, yes, those things my clients, they're asking for, right? So when you think about B2B governance, B2B lifecycle management, remote privilege access, right? So an external user trying to not only access a system in your organization, but like it could be an outsourcer that is doing privileged stuff. They're managing your AWS account. They're managing your cloud infrastructure, and they are a third party. So this type of situation, yes, to my clients, no, this is something that exists today. Technology is already on that level, that identity verification. I was just looking at the list. There are like hundreds of client or vendors doing this kind of stuff. And then same thing, there are hundreds of vendors today selling identity digital wallets, right? And I think for digital wallets and decentralized identity to get to the stage we are today in terms of mainstream adoption, I think interoperability is going to be key, right? Finding a common denominator, a common ground of, hey, this is how the flow should look like, and we work towards that goal.
Yeah, that's really good points there, Henrique. And Tim was talking a little bit about maybe thinking that we've got the desired outcomes that we want, maybe not quite right, and then thinking how about we link this into ROI, which is something else I wanted to get into. Kind of how do we think about what does success look like from all of this? Is it just better user experience? What are the other things that you think we should be thinking about?
Security. I think security is one thing. Are you safer, right? So what are my clients? They're going to measure, Henrique, what can I do so I don't get breached? Right, and in that sense, using a username and password or using a text to my SMS mobile phone number, is it good enough? So no, maybe we got to think of something else. A remote user that accesses your critical infrastructure, right? So if you think of all the breaches, a lot of times they're leveraging non-employees, and worse, they're leveraging now non-humans. Type of identity. So I think it's inevitable. And I know Tim is focused on the human aspect of the digital identity world, but the non-human side of that is going to be fundamental. If you think about a time-ticking bomb, that's it. Because they call the way the industry calls the non-human identities, those are like soft targets. Because if you overtake those accounts, if you abuse them, a user may not know because those are not supposed to be interactive to begin with. So non-human identities, machine identities, I think that's a problem that a lot of the times that's where my discussions with my clients are leading to as well. Because we've done a decent job with our workforce, even our B2C and B2C, and we know what they are. But machines, I have no idea. And when we have things like AWS Bedrock or Microsoft Copilot Studio, now we have citizen developers building more agents carrying identities. And I was at Identiverse and I saw this. I had this conversation with an analyst. It was amazing. This guy said, today, those type of bots, like performing things for us, these agents, the AI agents, they're like carrying something like a lanyard, like we do this to access their building, right? Their wallet, they have all the credentials with them. They're carrying, okay, I need to access this service. Now I use this to access this other. And they're all very high privileged type of credentials. So that's the scary part that I think it is much closer to a mainstream type of catastrophe, type of a very big impact that I would say at the same level of the age verification thing. So I think age verification is going to be super impactful, especially for B2C type of relationships. But for the workforce, the machine identity, the machine digital identity of those machines, right? So how we identify them, where are they coming from, and how we remove all those excessive badges and permissions that they have today, especially because citizen developers, they don't carry the knowledge that you have, Nick, or you, Tim, right, or I have, right? So they're citizens. They are doing other stuff. They're business users. They're not cybersecurity experts. They're not identity experts.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, so security is just going to be a major kind of issue, and it always has
The
been. I think it
ROI, I
always
think,
will
is going to be a
continue to
lot
be.
coming from there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Tim, you made a really interesting point. I'm trying to think about now, like where these credentials are coming from, and you made an interesting point about mDL has got like a lot of spotlights kind of put on it. I think there's somewhere in the region of 6 million or so issued in the US, and I think it's just great for the market to see some level of interest from consumers getting to use these. There's lots of party involved, states involved, Amber helping out, Google and Apple and Samsung are in there as well. So I think it's a sign that the things are really starting to kind of boil up there. But and just thinking about this from where you guys are coming from using this for kind of accessing systems, I'm imagining that we're going to be using either derivatives or actual government issued credentials initially. Do you think there'll be a place where privately issued credentials will be hot in the heels? I mean, maybe organizations will issue credentials to their own people to access systems, but how do you guys see that? Do you think it's going to be predominantly government issued credentials, or do you think we're going to see a swathe of kind of private credentials being used to access systems and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the nuance is in the access systems, right? Like, I think in the closed loop cases, meaning like the issuer is the verifier. So like the state of California, you're logging into Health and Human Services for the state of California. Probably makes sense that you just use your California MDL to sign in, because setting up another credential when they've issued you that credential doesn't make a ton of sense. But when you get into like signing into, open loop or cross services, I think it's again going to come down to user experience. I don't believe VDCs should be used for authentication, right? That's a fundamental piece there. But I do think they can be used for proof up. They can be used for account recovery. They can be used for proving claims to other people. But there will be cases where maybe it does make sense. I'll give you one real example. Most users in the US with a credit card use their credit card's app. Maybe it makes sense that XYZ credit card company issues their own app, a verifiable digital credential that they use as their own proof up mechanism when you're signing in on a new device, right? Like maybe that's a completely reasonable use of the technology, because it's closed loop, right? Issuer is the verifier. There's less privacy concerns. They're not putting anything into the credential that they don't already know because they issued it. And it solves their use cases. That's like the destiny, they're in control of their own destiny, which I think those are some really awesome use cases for it. But I think if they turned around and tried to use that as like their only authentication mechanism, I think they would quickly turn it off, right? Because the user experience will never be the same as like signing in with a passkey, right? I don't think there's any intent to make it the same, right? Because there should be, in most cases, higher friction for these credentials, right? And obviously different credentials will have different types of information in them, but there's a lot of concern about how easy will be to use a mobile driving license, for example, online, which I think will, to answer your question, result in a lot of derivative credentials, like whether they have some of the same claims in them, or they are pointers, for lack of a better term, to some backend, record, is to be seen. But it's a big concern about how easily it will be to use an MDL. So I think for private businesses, it's going to make a lot of sense to issue these either in like, there's kind of like the other bucket of digital credentials is like digital receipts, right? Like, and you can, that's a general thing, right? Anything you would want to give back to the user in a verifiable form, right? That's a big use, I think, for the private sector, especially for SIAM, right? Like even proof of a warranty for your laptop, instead of sending you a PDF, like that's going to be a VDC, and that's private, but that's not used for sign-in, right? It's some claim or authorization later. I think it gets very, very, very complicated when you do exclusively the sign-in flow, because also you need, especially in the short term, as I mentioned, you're going to need them to install your app. Whether it's called a wallet or it's just your normal app is I think moot at this point. But there's challenges. I do think MDLs will remain kind of the hot topic because more users have them, but also it's going to be a very turbulent 5 to 10 years because nobody is requiring you to have one, right? Like I imagine my parents will never in their lifetime put an MDL on their phone, right? Like it just,
which is probably a relief to you because you don't have to spend 10 hours on the phone every day trying to tell them how to use it, which is a common thing kids have with their parents, I guess.
And then that just means you have to keep all these fallbacks, and like you're still gonna have to do doc checks in like the analog way.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it makes sense. We talked a little bit there about, I guess, kind of usability. What would you say are challenges there, Henrique, that we encounter as we start to go over the next few years and try to work towards mass adoption?
I think the ROI, I think it's a great question you posed, Nick, and I think it's still there. I have a hypothesis, right, that we got to find a way that merchants, they also feel the reason for adopting this. So I mentioned the privacy preserving thing. That's great for consumers, right? So if you're a consumer and say, yeah, it's great to use this, I see the benefit, but who's paying for that technology, right? The whole trust of network. So having that type of adoption, my hypothesis is this: we already have systems like credit card payment networks, right? When you go to a merchant and you see like Visa or MasterCard or Amex, right? There's a benefit that would attract more consumers because it's easier to do business with that organization. So I hope that merchants that use decentralized identities or more of a digital wallet type of approach offer this type of benefit back as well, right? So yeah, it could be easier for doing business with us, and they see this increased revenue potentially, right? I think it is challenging, and I think that's one of the reasons why most of the time we see government and public sector initiating those initiatives, because they're not concerned about profit, right? They're concerned about other things. So digital driver's licenses, or digital documents as a citizen, maybe where we started first, because it is hard. It's hard to come with a value proposition that is justifiable from a return on investment. So I think we got to find a better way to fund these things, and I think the credit card network would be an interesting model to evaluate if that works. But also going back to the workforce and the cybersecurity concerns that we have today, right? I hope we get to a point where organizations feel that there's not a choice. It's the price to do business, right? To have something already in a better level of controls around security on your credentials and your permissions, and like removing long-standing privileges, removing all those type of unnecessary type of entitlements that we carry today, right? as an employee, right, or as a citizen, say, I don't want to carry 1 ounce of permissions additional than the bare minimum that I need to perform my job, right? I don't want to be liable for that type of thing. So I think it's going to have a combination of regulations coming in the industry, say this is the minimum acceptable level to sell things on the internet, or this is the minimal level of acceptable things if you are, for example, an electric car company and you have all these electric chargers. I have a whole story about that, how inefficient public charging systems for cars are from a CIAM perspective. So I think there might be a combination of regulations establishing a minimum level of efficiency, but also benefits that are also monetary, right, for those merchants to adopt that as well.
Yeah, great points. And we'll definitely catch up on the car charging as well, because it's definitely annoyingly expensive,
especially in Europe. Well. My experience was in Europe in specific.
Yeah, in some places it's more expensive almost, and I guess a lot of that expense is coming through kind of inefficiency, but it's almost as expensive as putting gasoline in your car, so it seems a bit crazy. So final question for you both, kind of crystal ball time then, and Tim, go to you first. Where is all this going? What are you thinking is going to happen maybe within a kind of 3 or 5 year time frame? Where will we be? Will we be mainstream, and from an enterprise perspective, what are your thoughts?
I think VDCs of various types will be 40% of enterprise onboarding, right? I think of some capability, right? Because it may not be that you're presenting your MDL directly to your employer, and maybe that you presented a physical document to some proofing company, they issued you back an artifact as a VDC, and then you present it to your your organization to bootstrap. So I think that's realistically going to be about 40% of these flows. They're already happening today via federation protocols. So whether we count those or not, I guess, is a different story. But and I think it will be this nice progression of you go through ID proofing, you present your credential, you enroll a passkey for your workforce, and then you're on your way. And I think what I talked about earlier is still the 5 to 10 year plan of being able to actually use an employee ID to get cross-company access, right? I think that's going to take a lot of time, and the most important piece with that is getting an employee badge onto everyone's device in some way, shape, or form. That I could see happening in 5 years, not everyone. But I do think you'll start to see organizations issuing, employee ID badges, especially given for remote work, right? Like Okta, for example, doesn't issue physical badges unless you ask for one because so many people are remote. So you have no proof that there's no business cards, right? Like nobody would get business cards anymore. So like you have no like actual proof that you work at a company other than like send me an email address from your email, right? Like that's typically how hotels do it, for example.
We're all going to storm the Okta building tomorrow on that information you'll see us there tomorrow. Stealing all your
so I do think
your
the employee ID will be kind of a very popular, I think we can call that a derived ID, right? It's derived from some government proof that your employer blesses, and I could see that becoming really important for recovery, onboarding, and general. I hate using like the employee discount use case because it's kind of weak, but it is out there, like
but it's still there, right? It's still there. Yeah. Henrique, what about you? What do you think we're going to see in the next 3-5 year time frame?
In 3 years, I think nothing of that will be real unless the application builders really adopt this thing, right? Because nothing changes until the application builders or the agent builders embed those type of new standards, these new capabilities in their own apps. So, of course, the AI augmented code development thing, which is going on right now, right? So the amount of code that's being generated by machines today and AI, we got to make sure that that type of advancement is spitting out code which already embeds good standards that Tim is working on and other people are working on. So it spits code with SPIFFE, it spits code with CAPE, spits codes with risk, right? So it already comes, and when it's generating apps for you, those type of AI generated code, SAML is a given. OpenID Connect is a given. Digital identity will be something that it's not only a choice, but hey, no, if you're building an app, it already comes with Passkeys, for example, right? I think that's going to happen faster than we think, 2 to 3 years.
Nice. Oh, thanks for that really good answer. And we've got one question, but I'm going to limit you both to like 30 seconds. The question is from Carl, because I've not been very good at getting us on to audience questions. So anyway, Carl says, or asks, do you see the reduced need to store security-related information of your users and the lessened security requirements as something that would be a positive thing for merchants? So thinking about kind of payment networks. Do you think that would be a positive thing for merchants, that reduced need for them to store security-related information of their users?
I think it's great, right? So the less, the better. The fewer things they store, the better. Fewer things to be stolen. And when I think of security things, like the authentication, the tokens of that user, but not how tall I am and all the other things, right? So that's a whole different discussion with CRM and customer database and customer data information. So yes, the answer is yes. Less stuff, the better.
Perfect. Tim, any differences from you?
Yes, with an asterisk, right? All of this stuff depends on laws, regulations, guidance changing, right? Like there are things you have to store. There are people who would tell you must store this information. So I think that as most things, right, the laws and the regulations will follow very far behind the technology. Maybe in some parts of the world it might actually be flipped because there's a lot of structure around these changes. But I do think eventually that will be the goal, because I think everyone will quickly realize that it benefits everyone. Absolutely, but we'll take some time.
Fantastic. Well, listen, we have reached the top of the hour. I think we could keep going all day. I think particularly if we start to dig into AI again, it would certainly extend out beyond probably Thursday. So good time to wrap it up. So I just want to say thank you to Henrique, SVP of Strategy at Saviynt, and Tim, Senior Architect of Identity Standards at Okta. Thank you very much for your time, guys. Great session. and look forward to seeing you both in the very near future.
Absolutely. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you.